Welcome to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to COVID, business continuity, resilience, anything that can help you, your organization, or your community prepare for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free. You can find me on LinkedIn. I am the only Alex Fullick there. I'm really easy to find, and I do respond to everything I get. Based on that comment, today's guest did just that. She was watching a previous episode with Catherine McEwen, I believe,
That's right.
who was also recommended by somebody else, Tammy Horton. So we've got a nice little chain going here. Today we're going to talk about radical knowledge management. And this is something I hadn't heard of before, so I'm really interested in learning about this. And I'd like to welcome today Stephanie Barnes. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alex. I'm really happy to be here.
And welcome to being another link in this chain that we've got going here.
Thanks. Yeah, this is really exciting. Let's see how far we can keep this going.
Yes, hopefully somebody sees this and steps up and wants to be on the show as well. We've got a nice, interesting flow going here.
Yeah.
Now, I know you and I have had some conversations back and forth, so I know a little bit about you. But for our global listeners and viewers that are literally all over the world, can you take a moment and tell us about yourself, what you do, and how you got into what you do?
Sure. I'm a Canadian based in Berlin, so let me start with that part. I am a knowledge management consultant, but I'm a knowledge management consultant with a twist because I'm an artist, a self-taught artist. So I started bringing that into my consulting practice 12 years ago or so. Although I've been a knowledge management consultant for 20 years with an undergrad in accounting and an MBA in IT. So I get all these people with their numbers and their data and want all the data. I get the number crunching part of it. And I can tell you though, from my own personal experience, that adding some balance and some creativity and some arts in really does bring balance and resilience to our work and to our lives. And so yeah, I don't know. I think that's probably enough about me at this point.
Now, Stephanie, as part of me getting up to speed on what radical knowledge management was, sent me a whole pile of articles. So thanks for all of that. I did read them all. They're all stacked up beside me here. We're going to talk about that and some of the things that I'm going to ask you today. I pulled out of those articles. So I'm looking forward to this chat. So why don't I start with the most obvious question that everybody is probably thinking about out there? What is radical knowledge management?
Well, radical knowledge management is the radical idea let me not start with radical. I'll get to why it's radical in a moment. Knowledge management's about learning. It's helping us have the information we need to do our jobs, helping us cope and know what we need to know and share it with others in our organization, or other stakeholders, could be outside of our organization as well. And so, as I said in my little blurb at the beginning, I started painting about 2011 and thought, this is really fun, but how can I bring this into my consulting practice? Because I was self-employed by that point. And I'm like, let's start experimenting. So I started experimenting and notice this shift in people's energies and their engagement in the workshop that I was doing. And I was just doing the same workshops that I had always done, requirements analysis, strategy, whatever, you name it, whatever the workshop was. I was doing these little creative interventions, little scribble drawings and things. And people were just more engaged. I got better answers. I started doing same little activity at the end of the workshops, and they were happy to go back to their desks and face this 300 emails that had come in while we were in the half-day workshop, right? And I thought, wow, this is incredible. I'm going to keep doing this. And so I did. And so it eventually became radical knowledge management. I called it creative knowledge management for a long time. And it didn't really speak to a lot of people because they thought they knew what creativity meant. And they thought creativity was, not for them. It was a waste of time. It wasn't important for our businesses and our organizations, and and I was just not, this was not an interesting approach for them. And then the pandemic came, and all of a sudden people were like, oh, this, what we're doing isn't working. We need to work differently. People are tired, Zoom fatigue, all of that stuff. It also gave me some time to do some additional research and digging into some of the ideas and concepts that I'd come up with or noticed in my own sort of informal practices, or the thread I kept pulling from 2011. And that's when I started calling it Radical KM. And radical is about going back to the roots of how we learn, which is why I started off saying knowledge management's about learning. Radical is about going back to our roots. And so going back to the roots of how we learn. And how we learn is being playful and creative and iterative, all of these things that we learn by tapping into our inner artist. And so radical knowledge management is about basically being whole again and bringing our creativity in. It's not everywhere. People get, a little concerned sometimes when I start talking about painting, because we do paint in my sessions when we have time. And I'm not an artist, but it's not about the end product. It's about the process. And so this is where the resilience stuff comes in too, is that it opens space up. It lets us reflect. It gives us a moment to breathe and look at things differently and say, oh, we've been doing it the same way for 30 years. Maybe it's time we reconfigure things and look at things differently and have a different solution. So that's where radical knowledge management comes from.
Well, I have so many questions. I'll start off with the first one, because I just know there are people out there asking, what on earth does painting have to do with knowledge management or resilience? How I'm sure they are probably struggling with trying to connect those dots because it is radical.
Absolutely. And it's about knowledge creation. So when I'm using painting in my workshops, in the sessions that I lead, usually I would do the painting in four half days or 2 full days if we were doing it in person. It gets broken up differently when I'm doing it remotely, so that kind of difference, but it's a bigger intervention. But it's about helping people develop some confidence, because a lot of people have really bad experiences at school with art. Certainly I did. I had a teacher in 8th grade criticize my perspective on this perspective exercise we were doing. That was the last time I ventured anywhere near any kind of art materials, until I did this leadership workshop in 2011. And so giving them a safe space to play with some art materials, stuff that they haven't played with since they were kids, may have some bad memories, in the safe space, just lets people go, oh, I can put some paint on the canvas and it's okay. I do non-representational things, so it's not a still life. It's not trying to look like an apple in a bowl or anything like that. It's just put some paint on the canvas. Use whatever tools you would like. Use whatever paint color you would like. Tap into your intuition. Listen to your internal voice. Don't try and go, oh well, what does the computer say I should use? What does the AI say I should use? No, tap into yourself. What color do you feel like using? And so it helps them look at things differently and open up different questions. So it's transferable. I have used the painting exercise with coaching clients when they're trying to figure out, when they've got this mess of things around them, they can't decide what they want to do. They're at some kind of transition point or transformation point in their lives. And so we paint it. And through the painting process over a number of weeks, they get some insights into what is important to them. What do they want to be doing? What does make them happy? And it's just through this reflection, this process of reflection, that this kind of transformation happens. So it fits into knowledge management because I would say it's a step before what typically gets incorporated into an ideation process. We do ideation, we come in and go, okay, everybody, we're going to brainstorm answers to this question. And we start off really directed right away. And so it's a step before that to say, hold on, this is what we're going to do in the workshop, but we're just going to shift some energy, open things up, get our minds out of the boxes that we're in right now, and then we'll be more directed. But right now we're just going to open up and see what happens.
That must be hard though, because and you mentioned brainstorming, so it's a perfect example for people who want to be creative but don't know how, because they will attend a brainstorming session. Okay, throw out ideas, throw everything on the table, everything's a go. And as soon as the first suggestion comes out, you've got the leader, usually the leader, or somebody anyway. I shouldn't just point a finger at the leader, but somebody in that room will immediately shoot it down. You barely started and you're shooting people down already. So it's got to be tough for people to be able to take those blinders off, or sometimes I guess you could describe it as having chains on, to actually do what they want to do.
Yeah. Well, and so the painting kind of adds an element, I would say, of team building into the session, a bit of fun, relaxes everybody, sort of takes some of the pressure off. When I do my brainstorming sessions, especially when I'm doing them digitally, to prevent some of that, jumping to solutions too quickly or shooting each other's answers down, is to let everybody do their own brainstorming for 2 or 3 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever, fits with the schedule of the meeting, and let them fill in as many stickies as they want. No input from anybody else. And then we'll start through, a group, because sometimes when you see then the sticky that says, I don't know, the interface should be blue, they'll say, oh, I didn't think about the interface. And it'll trigger a bunch of other things from other people. And so then you can start some synergy, of developing ideas and further expanding, but start from that base of everybody working on their own brainstorming. It helps the introverts like me in the sessions too.
Yep,
Yeah. It helps us get our ideas out there without anybody else, taking over the floor, because those extroverts do like to corner the floor and talk and hear themselves talk. So it gives us a fighting chance.
Nobody send me emails about that, by the way.
Yeah, me either.
You do, in one of your articles, actually in a couple, you reference this, and you've kind of touched on it, but I was wondering if you could go a little bit deeper on this question. You talk about people in general having the creativity educated out of us, and that's the quote, educated out of us. What did you mean by that?
So that actually comes from someone else, and I've just drawn a blank on his name, but YouTube. He's the most watched YouTube, or not YouTube, TED Talk. Ken, I'll overthink of it, hopefully by the end of this. But anyway, he's the most watched TED Talk. And the idea, what that means is we go through education, and when we're young, when we're 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, we're creative like crazy. And there's studies on this. There's a big NASA study on this that they did longitudinal, that studied a cohort of children over I don't know, 30 or 40 years, a long period of time. And the kids were really creative when they're 5 years old. And as they progress through schools, they get increasingly less creative. So their amount of creativity went down. So by the time they graduated, when they're 17, 18, they're like 10% creative, where they were 90% creative when they were 5 years old. And then by the time they're in the workforce, they're even lower. They're 5% once they're adults and they're in the workforce. So we've lost all this creativity because we're so focused on getting a good mark. So we get into a good university, so we get a good job so that we can, accumulate all this stuff that we may or may not need, and our creativity is just educated out of us because we're told it's not useful, it's not necessary. Only a few lucky people that are artists, it's okay for them. But for the rest of us, it's a hobby, it's not important, it's not necessary. You can get through life without it. And you can, but it's a lot less fun.
Well,
And a
it
lot less
comes
great.
back to bite organizations and communities for that matter, and families later on anyway, because at some point you're in a meeting or you're something, and people start saying we need to think outside of the box. That everybody says that at some point,
Yes.
and yet from what you're describing by then, how can I think outside of the box when I've just gone through 20, 30 years of not really being allowed or supported to think outside of the box.
Yep. You've just spent 20 years getting comfortable in that box and learning about the box, and now somebody wants you to think outside of the box. But the arts have this huge impact on our brain and on our lives, and we're really have done ourselves a disservice by saying that it's not important, because it really, really is. So
Yeah. And that would impact, I'm guessing, things like decision making, our own resilience type thing, because we're not open to those different perspectives or creativity in our thinking anymore.
yeah, exactly. It impacts our mental health, our wellness, our healing, our the team building. There's a team building aspect to it and a community aspect. There's learning. So this ties into the KM stuff. Sustainable mindset, sustainable leadership skills, that ability to see the big picture and make better decisions, understand the interconnectedness of things and go, oh, but if I take that, resource and use it all up, what are the consequences of that? I have to dispose of it. Maybe it's toxic, or my processing is toxic. How do I really dispose of it? Whereas a lot of what happens now is, oh, well, there's lots of whatever this is. Who cares? Well, no, we need to care. And we have, so tapping into our inner artist helps us see that bigger picture and the interconnectedness to go, oh, but okay, we need that resource, but we need to be able to deal with it on the back end. And so tapping into our inner artists helps us have those skills and see the bigger picture.
But that's got to be a big challenge, though, because it's not just employees where that's being attributed to, the lack of creativity. Management would have gone through the exact same thing, or vice
Absolutely.
presidents or executive C-suite, they would have gone through the whole thing. So everybody would be outside. They would be inside that box, even though they want to think outside that box.
Absolutely. And management and leadership and CEOs have been rewarded for being inside that box and performing really well inside that box, and this is a problem, and I hear about programs trying to reintroduce arts and make the arts a bigger part of the education system, which is great for the kids. But what about all of us who are in the workforce, who are done our formal education? And so that's what radical knowledge management is about trying to bring that into the workplace for those of us who are outside of our formal education years and need to reactivate it. And because it's there, it's just dormant. So, having a bit of fun and doing some scribble drawings or doing, some painting if we have the time, then this is a good thing, and we reactivate things, and then we can make those sustainable decisions and see the bigger picture and the impact of what we're doing.
Well, what do you say to those leaders or employees, anybody really, who will think of it, and how did I put it with your note to you? Oh, that lovey, hippie type of feel, see it as something like that, right? Oh, that's like trippy something from the 60s or whatever, because it is a change, obviously, being creative to make better decisions in your organization, to help you become resilient, and new product designs or marketing ideas, whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Yeah. And to them, I say, give it a try. Oh, it's an experiential thing. And I have lots of people say to me, oh, no, it sounds nice. And that's nice. There was a book published a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago, called Your Brain on Art. And it's all this neuroscience about the benefits of your brain on art. I'm doing art. And so, I love that book, because it provides all the science. And so it helps me come back against those people who go, oh no, we're not doing that hippie arty thing. No, no, no. And I can say, no, but look at the neuroscience. This is good for your brain, and here's all the things that it does. So when it sounds like it's this magic panacea that fixes everything, it does. And here's the neuroscience that backs it up. So I talk about this book all the time. The author should be paying me. But it's so true, and it's so lovely to have all that research put in one place so that I can just, like I say, hold it up and say, look at this. You need to read this. If you don't believe what the benefits of this are, read the book. So
one question before we take a break. How do you deal with the fact that people are working from home nowadays? Many of us are.
Yeah.
Where this might have worked a little bit better if everybody was sitting in a meeting room and could paint together, and you're there leading the workshop. How do you go about trying to do that same thing with all of us at home now?
Oh, it works great. I would say
All
the
right.
same. It's not quite the same, because when we're co-located in the same room, I can walk around behind people and look over their shoulders and go, so what are you doing? And see some of that body language stuff, which is nice and useful, certainly. But I can do almost the same thing on Zoom or whatever we're using. And just people have to hold their paintings up to the camera. So, I give them the list because most people like to support their local businesses. So I give them the list of art supplies to go and get from their local art store, and get them to prepare their kitchen table or wherever they're going to do the exercise. And we do it. Zoom is there off to the side, pointing at them, and we have the conversations the same way that we have the conversations in the room. People are anxious about what color, so we talk about how to pick the color, what tool, how they should put the paint on. We have the conversations, honestly, are exactly the same. So yeah, like I said, the only thing that's different is I can't walk behind people and see what they're doing. But otherwise it's the same. And the same with the shorter activities. They work the same, well, just about the same, but they're pen and paper, and everybody has a pen and paper, and we do the scribble drawings. Some of the improv activities that I do need a little bit of thought, just because when you're co-located, you can see the people in the circle, so what the order is. But on Zoom, or like I say, whatever your media, whatever your teleconferencing software is, you need to say, okay, Alex, you're 1, Stephanie, you're 2, Joanne, you're 3, John, you're 4, so what the order is. And then you can do the improv, the one word at a time, or whatever the improv game is, knowing that who's the order. So most of it just takes a little bit of thought to adjust the logistics for it, but it all works. We have a great time on things. All my classes now are remote or virtual. So
nice.
Yeah.
On that note, we've come to the end of our first segment. We are talking about radical knowledge management with Stephanie Barnes, and I do have a few more questions for you about this, and we will be right back. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe, and in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.